As you all know, World War II is a period brimming with horrific stories and bloody battles that should never be repeated. However, that does not mean there were no great role models during that decade, such as the Red Army Division led by Ivan Panfilov, who, despite being outmatched in every way by the Nazis, managed to defend their nation from a tragic fate. The film takes place at the end of 1941, in the midst of the Soviet-Russian winter, and shortly after the first stage of the Battle of Moscow. In the camp of the 316th Rifle Division of the Red Army, a lieutenant named Basil Y. asks if any of his soldiers know how to operate tractors. A mischievous, non-commissioned officer, Moskalenko, volunteers one of his comrades, but this soldier explains that although he is an equipment operator, he has no experience with tractors. After that, the lieutenant goes on to explain how German tanks work and their weak spots, as they are the main threat in battle. Meanwhile, in one of the barracks, we see some officers nervous about a phone conversation involving their battalion commander, Ivan Panfilov. As soon as the call ends, the commander leaves without giving his soldiers any answers. He hurries to the headquarters, leaving his men in the camp. The new mission for the officers is to gather enough materials to build a scale model of a German tank so they can learn how to attack it. Because Moskalenko talks too much, he is the first one sent to perform this task. While his men work, their supervising officer tells the story of Philly, a Soviet comrade who became a hero of the Red Army by destroying an enemy anti-tank gun. Even though he was discovered, he took several Nazis to the grave with him. Not far away, a young soldier named Gabriel is working with a more seasoned officer, expressing his confusion about being confined to camp for weeks. Drawing on his experience, the older officer assures him that the commander has a plan for them there. That night, the soldiers finish the wooden tank model, and the lieutenant explains how to destroy those vehicles from a trench. Musabek, one of the younger soldiers, fails in his first attempt, though the lieutenant points out they can also attack tanks from behind. Meanwhile, Ivan is meeting with various officers to discuss the current position of the Germans and possible routes of attack. The commander reveals his real objective: to hold off an entire battalion's onslaught until reinforcements arrive, because they are the only obstacle standing between the capital, Moscow, and the enemy. It's an almost impossible task given the disparity in power and especially the enemy tanks. But none of the officers complain. They are ready to give their lives for their country. Afterward, the commander sees his men outside, having fun and playing in the snow, but he does not scold them. These could be their last hours of joy before the operation begins. Ivan rallies them all, motivating them to carry out their mission no matter how tough it seems. The country depends on them. Then on the way to their defensive positions, alongside the 50th Cavalry Division, a pair of confident captains, Pavel and Klutchkov, ask why they don't attack the Germans directly by surprise. He even replies that they have a better chance of winning if they focus on defense. When they reach their destination, an open field in the middle of a frigid forest, the Soviets begin digging trenches to set up their anti-tank artillery. By morning, when their defenses are well prepared, they spot a German plane passing overhead. Although it's far away, Soldier Jardim starts shooting at it, alongside other allies, while a pair of officers arrive with a huge roll of barbed wire. Wire they previously tried to trade for better food than what the army provides, but none of the nearby villages gave them a good deal. Later on, Pavel receives a call from Ivan, who requests a status report. The captain informs him that everything is fine for now, earning himself a decent night's rest. If only they knew it would be their last. At the same time, the Nazis also prepare for the offensive with many more soldiers and more powerful equipment, not stopping to rest for a single second. At dawn, the Germans begin their attack, bombing a Soviet decoy position while the real troops remain hidden in the trenches. Once the wave of bombs ends, the Germans advance with infantry and tanks, while the Soviets hold their fire. After a few tense minutes, it's the Russians' turn. They fire their artillery, taking the Germans, who had swallowed the bait, thinking there were no enemies in the area, completely by surprise. This inflicts many casualties and destroys tanks, to the delight of the Russian artillery crews watching the spectacle. Seeing such strong Soviet defenses, the Germans pull back a few meters, though they will certainly return with greater force. Their next move involves German planes pinpointing the Soviet positions for the upcoming wave. The Soviet artillerymen shift their positions while the infantry waits in the trenches, ready to take action if necessary. For the time being, the first Russian defensive line holds strong, adding more enemy casualties and destroyed tanks, even as the tanks draw close enough to fire back. Though they suffer their first losses, the Soviets remain undeterred, helping one another to force the Germans into a second retreat. This gives the Soviets a chance to catch their breath, smoke, chat, and reload. They evacuate Soldier Pasha to the nearest military hospital so he can have his injuries treated, not without receiving praise from Klitschko, who assures him that he has done an excellent job and become a hero. Upon returning to their makeshift camp, Klitschko calls the commander to report the battle's results, in which they lost no allies, apart from Pasha's severe injuries. Meanwhile, the Nazis relocate their cannons and prepare for the next round. They took a serious beating in the last engagement, but now they know precisely where their enemies are. In the Russian trenches, a soldier named Nadarov tries to bring down a Nazi plane with his machine gun, but only ends up giving away his position. German bombs rain down on him, though he and his comrades manage to reach safety in time. This time, the Nazi bombardment is far more accurate, and the Soviets can do nothing but wait out the storm. One soldier tries to run for an underground shelter, but is hit by a projectile. His comrades rush to bring him to safety and treat his injuries. Back at headquarters, an anxious Ivan awaits the attack. After several more bombs, the Germans halt their barrage, granting the Soviets a moment of respite. The Soviets withdraw to a defensive position to hold out more effectively against the next wave, also taking advantage of the opportunity to search for wounded comrades and bring them to safety. Unfortunately, they also count their first fallen, dozens killed in the bombardment. At last, Klitschko calls Ivan again to request reinforcements, but the commander still does not have any available, forcing them to hold their ground with only 28 soldiers left, those who survived that deadly previous bombing. Morale is low in the face of this reality, but Klitschko reminds them once more that they are the last line of defense, and they must be willing to give their lives to stop the Nazis and prevent them from reaching Moscow. With that, the remaining soldiers gather their scarce ammunition and weapons, dividing themselves into 3 groups. Each group is assigned a specific tank to take down. Soon the enemy infantry and their tanks approach the trenches again, finding no resistance. Part of Klitschko's plan to make them believe all the Soviets are dead. When the Germans draw close enough, the Russians open fire. The tanks respond with their superior firepower. They kill a couple of Russian officers operating an anti-tank rifle, so a different soldier must take the weapon and aim at one of the tanks. A shot to its side renders the vehicle immobile. Not far away, a pair of Russian officers hidden in the snow wait for a German infantry platoon to get close so they can cut them down with a turret gun. Because the Germans have nowhere to hide, the Soviets handle them easily. Elsewhere, the Russians toss clusters of grenades and Molotov cocktails at the frontline tanks, while the turret gunners keep firing, even when a tank gets them in its sights. Despite their bravery, they stand no chance against a German tank's cannon blast. In another sector of the trenches, a soldier named Kassafe reloads his anti-tank rifle with his comrades' help. Working together, they manage a perfect shot to the head of a tank driver. Step by step, they disable more tanks with grenades and Molotovs, taking out their panicked crews as they scramble out to avoid being burned. At the edge of the forest, a Soviet artilleryman fires at the mechanical monsters from the side. But once his position is exposed, he becomes another casualty. With ammunition and artillerymen running low, the Soviets decide to wait until the tanks roll over their trenches, planning to face the enemy infantry in close quarters. In the midst of it all, a badly wounded Moskalenko summons one last burst of strength to throw a grenade at a tank, saving a comrade's life. Moments later, another Russian soldier climbs on a German tank, shoving its gunner back inside and tossing in a grenade. Another machine down. Still, none of it is enough to halt the Nazi advance. But the Red Army continues fighting, displaying more bravery than strategy. Their situation is so desperate that they start throwing rocks as if they were grenades, hoping to scare the Germans and slow them a bit. Meanwhile, Klitschko lobs an explosive at another mechanical beast, though he is hurt by the blast. Even so, he manages to order another soldier to finish off that tank's operators. After more skirmishes, the Russians run out of ammunition altogether, so they retreat into their trenches, armed with only axes and shovels. But just as the Germans are about to storm the trenches, they fall prey to Daniel's trap, a Soviet who was thought to be dead, but manages to intercept a turret gun and mow down a large number of Nazis. This unexpected slaughter of their troops forces the German commander of the 2nd Battalion, waiting behind them, to order a retreat. That action grants the Red Army victory, despite the Soviets having lost nearly all of their men. Therefore, the sergeant congratulates Daniel on his heroic act and the remaining comrades for enduring such hardship and destroying over 50 tanks. They have not only become national heroes, but have also defended Moscow from a terrible attack that could have completely changed the course of history as we know it. Sometime later, monuments such as the Kars Memorial were built to honor the valor of the 28 men under Panfilov's command, who demonstrated that, despite having all the odds stacked against them, they never gave up.